there's so much I want to talk to you about. But anyway, I'm a huge, I have to say, without sounding stalkish, I'm obviously a deep-time, huge admirer of your work. And, and there's 1,000 questions I want to ask you. Like, your titles are so enigmatic and unexpected and mysterious often. I mean, why the eclipse of moths? Obviously we know what an eclipse of moths is. I don't know whether you want to elaborate on that.
Well, the title Eclipse of Moths refers to the congregation of moths to a light. And I thought that was such a beautiful metaphor on many levels, starting with the fact that I think all my pictures at their foundation are concerned with light. Like, all the narrative codes in my pictures are using light as a way of transforming the subject or charging the picture in some way. So I just like that as a guiding metaphor for the work. And then one of the themes that runs through the pictures is the street lamp. Mm-hmm. It's almost in every single picture. And I thought of these lone figures as they're wandering through empty streets are drawn to the street light, almost as a kind of beacon.
Starkfield Lane has the street lamp collapsed, and there's something, talking about uncanny, there's something very sinister and unprotected and alien about the street lamps in the series. It's not a place of refuge, and the streets themselves, it's interesting you made them quite a relatively, you didn't make them yesterday, but they seem like the streets of Los Angeles and every major city around America. And right now, it's almost like you've got second sight or something.
I want everything in the picture to feel both nondescript and slightly worn and slightly broken. So I look for locations that can accommodate that. And we put in all our own prop cars, and we put in our own street signs, and we work very closely with the city to make sure that no streets are paved and that all the grass remains unmowed, because we want this feeling of just like a place that's been somewhat forgotten and slightly neglected. And we change out all the street lamps. We actually put in different bulbs into the street lamps, and
right.
We work with the fire department to wet down all the streets, and we use fog machines, and all of this is effort to create a world that feels both familiar and enchanting at the same time, that it feels, again, that sort of sense of something feeling like you've seen it, you've been here before, but it feels changed or transformed or filled with some unease or menace. But what that is remains indeterminate. I think that's really important in all the work, is that exactly what's happening is always left a question. It's never answered in any of the pictures. If the pictures have a social commentary, it's elliptical. It doesn't reveal itself as a kind of overt gesture.
Do they crystallize as images for you in almost a dreamlike moment? I often think, that often one's inspiration comes in that wonderful moment between when you're awake and asleep. Just before you're fully awake, you can fully perceive something, do you pre-realize them, or is it in your drives around your eternal circling around you? You know, have you ever left your state? One wonders. Do you see a part of an image and then fill it out from there? Where do they begin?
So the process always begins with location. It's like location, location, location. And as you sort of mentioned, I would drive endlessly around. And it's really hard to say exactly what I'm looking for, but it's that feeling of somehow feeling familiar and also feeling this can accommodate one of my pictures. It's as simple as that. It's like how the world looks in terms of, oh yeah, I see it. And then through that process of just like returning over and over to these places, an image will come to mind.
When you're finding that location, do you immediately imagine a time of day in connection to place, or do you often allow that sense to grow as you're putting the picture together and say, well, actually, no, the light needs to come from here? Do you play around with time as a secondary concept, or is that immediately interwoven with place?
Well, the light and the time and the day and all that sort of comes together, both in terms of kind of the poetics of like twilight, but also the practicality of working with all the lights. So we have like many lights up in like lifts, we have lights in cars, we have lights in stores, and that's all sort of coming together with the twilight. So there's only a very short moment where these pictures could come into fruition. It's when everything balances into creating this, like what I would call a perfect moment, and it's all in all of its imperfection, you know. But that's what I live for as an artist, is that moment when we see it just kind of emerge in front of us on the set, you know. And it's really important to me that the pictures always maintain a kind of realism, that I'm not interested in the artifice, all the lighting and the any kind of production value. I don't want to see that in the picture. I want it all to recede in a way. And what I really want is like for the viewer to enter into a world, the world of the picture, like they would any great movie or any other work of art.
You know, I feel sometimes in the work that the figures are experiencing entrapment somehow, but there seems to be a slightly different quality here, which is it's like they're waiting. You know, that they're at bus stops, they're on doorsteps, they're, you know, in containers, they're, you know, on stoops, and they really are. It's not trapped. It's just it's a profound sense of waiting. But then you're talking about what is happening in the moment, but they seem very cut off from their past and their present. You know, and perhaps, you know, that, you know, talk about placing your own situation on top of an image. I mean, maybe I'm feeling that acutely because of the state that we're finding ourselves in globally. I found that really resonant in the images.
I think you really named something that I maybe not even conscious of, but I think is absolutely correct, is that like moment of deliberation or waiting or and waiting for in between a moment that, you know, of some kind of before and some kind of after. And I think that's really key to the work, that kind of psychological paralysis of some sort. I when I was making the pictures, that wasn't something I was really conscious of. But like when I'm looking back at it now, I know like during that period, I was also going through like a series of like health issues. And I know that in all my pictures, or all artists do, is like they project whatever fears or anxieties they have onto their pictures. And I do feel like, again, it's not conscious, but I do feel that like there is that sort of, maybe part of what I was sort of looking for in these figures is some version of myself.
Do you have in your mind, I mean, obviously you are looking down the lens and ultimately it is your perspective, but it's a question I ask sometimes of directors on set. I say, so whose perspective is this? And, you know, because then, you know, in a way something can be revealed to the camera because you know who's looking at it. Do you imagine who is looking down the lens at these people in this atmosphere, in these strange, uncanny, alien worlds that you create?
I always love the phrase "there but not there," and I feel like it's defining in terms of my sort of general aesthetic of like, I want a perspective where it feels omnipresent, but also almost absent, you know. I love the dynamic between presence and absence and feeling like you're looking in on something, but not fully there. That's what I try to get in all my pictures, like that sense of peering in on a world and witnessing something.
And can I mean, I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask you this, but why this continual elliptical relationship you have with small New England towns, usually on fire or extremely wet? But why these small towns? What continually draws you back there, do you think? Or, you know?
It's, you know, like anything, it's like, it's complicated, but I think in the most basic and literal reason was that we grew up in Brooklyn and my family had a log cabin that we used to go to in the summer, not far from where I am right now. And so I think these are the very same small towns that I used to visit as a child and go to my first movies and and was sort of kind of enchanted by. So it's definitely grounded in my past.
We're talking before a little bit about the notion of inside out, you know, and I always think about the sublime when I look at your works, because there's something about the town always bordering the relationship to nature that the towns have, you know, and it's often the towns are built to eradicate nature and nature's coming back in. You know, the figures often seen, particularly when they're in either in the ground or in the water or by the water, almost like fish out of water, returning to something but not knowing how to return. That relationship between nature is really powerful. It sounds like that's their kind of very dormant, recessed, deep images for you from, once again, from childhood. Yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned the theme of nature, because that is central to the work. It's like these pictures were made during the height of summer, and it is part of the work is that relationship between these kind of industrial landscapes and the impinging nature that is both like seen as a possible, there is a certain underlining suggestion of anxiety in that, but it's also redemptive. It's like it's about renewal in the end.
Something too, and mentioned Cobra before, about the participants in your images, their relationship to the narrative that they're in, or to fantasy. You've got this sense that somehow what was full of joy and daring and excitement, a fun park, is now a place of, because it's repressed by nature and nature has taken over, there's a sinister quality to what was once joyful. It's a real tension that is in, that I think that there's incredible beauty, but there's also this terrible, nightmarish, sinister quality in there that often the participants are unaware of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, that goes back to the locations. That particular picture is like a kind of abandoned holding for these carnival rides, and I thought, like, there's something so kind of, again, haunting and beautiful about that location, and the broken down Cobra ride.
But it literally looks like it's been dropped in from some alien planet.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I'm sure everyone's got a theory about this. All of us who so deeply admire your work, and we form connective tissue thematically and symbolically within your work. But what do you see as kind of the central tenets or the central themes that keep emerging in your work?
I mean, I've always said that every artist has one central story to tell. Mm-hmm. And this story emerges when you come of age as a young artist. You define what movies you respond to, what artists you respond to, what are your arguments, what are the things that drive you. And then you spend the rest of your life in a certain way fighting those battles over and over again. They don't really change. So you can do whatever you can to, like, push yourself forward, but you're still can't get away from yourself as an artist, ever. So
it's excruciating, isn't it?
You're doomed. You're doomed. And you could, but at the same time, you could take certain comfort in that, because you know that you're never going to truly resolve that story. Like, whatever that story is, that weird combination of, like, fears and anxieties and a kind of pictorial form, you could kind of rehearse that over and over again. But in the end, one picture will lead to the next picture, which will lead to the picture after that. And the ultimate meaning of what you're doing will always remain slightly outside of your grasp.